The sirens were getting closer. I could hear them wailing through the thin walls of our living room as I stood there, surrounded by scattered papers, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. My husband was shouting something, his face red, but I couldn't make out the words over the roaring in my ears. The hotel receipts lay spread across the coffee table like playing cards in some twisted game I never agreed to play. 3 months earlier, none of this existed. 3 months earlier, I was blissfully unaware that my entire life was a carefully constructed lie. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter for this story, but what happened to me does. I'm 62 years old, and I've been married for 38 years. That's longer than most people have been alive. We built a life in Phoenix, in one of those neighborhoods where everyone waves at each other and pretends everything is fine. Our house had a porch where I'd sit with my coffee every morning, watching the sky turn from purple to orange. I thought I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every neighbor's routine, every detail of my husband's schedule. I was wrong about that last part. It started with a bill. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Just a piece of paper in the mail pile. I was sorting through the usual clutter, credit card offers, and grocery store flyers when I found an envelope addressed to both of us. It was from a hotel downtown, one of those boutique places with rooftop bars and infinity pools that show up in magazines. The Meridian. I remember staring at the name embossed on the letterhead, trying to remember if we'd stayed there for our anniversary. We hadn't. Our anniversary was at home, pizza and a movie, like always. I opened it. The bill was for 3 nights, midweek in January. Room service, champagne, late checkout. The total made my stomach turn. Not because of the amount, though it was significant, but because I had no memory of it. None whatsoever. And I would have remembered. I keep track of these things. I've always been the one who balances our checkbook, pays the utilities, remembers whose birthday is coming up. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the bill in front of me. The fluorescent light overhead was buzzing, that annoying frequency that gets inside your head. I remember that buzz. I remember everything about that moment with a clarity that still makes my chest tighten. I slid the paper across to him. No accusation, no dramatics, just, "Honey, what's this?" I don't remember us staying at the Meridian. He barely looked at it, didn't even pick it up, just glanced down, then back at his phone. "Just pay it," he said. 3 words, flat, dismissive, like I'd asked him about taking out the trash. Something in my chest went cold. It wasn't anger yet. It was smaller than that, sharper. Like a splinter you can't quite see but you know is there, working its way deeper. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice level. "When did we stay there?" He sighed, the kind of sigh that said I was bothering him with trivial things. "I must have used it for a business meeting. Just pay the bill, okay? I've got calls to make." And he left the room. Just like that. Walked away while I sat there with that buzzing light and that hotel bill and a feeling in my gut that something fundamental had just shifted. I paid it. Of course I paid it. What else was I supposed to do? But that splinter stayed, burrowing deeper every time I thought about it. 3 nights, midweek, business meeting. None of it made sense. My husband worked in insurance, had for decades. His business meetings happened in conference rooms at the office or over lunch at chain restaurants. They didn't involve boutique hotels and champagne. I know what you're thinking. You're shouting at your screen right now, telling me to wake up, to demand answers. But here's what people don't understand about marriage. When you've been with someone for almost 4 decades, you learn to explain away the inconsistencies. You build narratives that protect you from the painful truths. You tell yourself stories where everyone stays good and nothing breaks. That night, lying in bed next to him while he snored, I constructed my story. Maybe it was a client dinner that ran late. Maybe his company was courting some high-profile account and they needed to impress them. Maybe I'd misunderstood what constituted a business expense. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. Maybe I was crazy. That last thought was the one that stuck, because if I wasn't crazy, if my instincts were right, then everything else was wrong. and I wasn't ready to face that yet. The next few weeks passed in a strange fog. I went through my routines, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, book club on Thursdays, Sunday dinners at our daughter's place. But underneath it all, that splinter worked its way deeper. I found myself watching him more closely, noticing things, the way he angled his phone away from me when he texted, how he'd started going to the gym, suddenly, after years of talking about it but never following through. The new cologne, subtle but different from what he'd worn for the last decade. Small things, tiny fractures in the foundation I'd built my life on. I started doubting myself more intensely than I ever had before. Was I being paranoid? Was I turning into one of those suspicious wives who saw betrayal in every shadow? I'd read articles about women who drove themselves crazy with baseless accusations, who destroyed good marriages because of their own insecurities. I didn't want to be that woman. So I said nothing. I swallowed the questions, pushed down the unease, and pretended everything was normal. Because that's what I'd learned to do over 38 years. Smooth things over, keep the peace, don't make waves. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly I'd been trained for this moment. All those years of being accommodating, of putting his needs first, of convincing myself that my feelings were probably just overreactions. It had built a prison I didn't even know I was in. The second bill came 6 weeks later. Same hotel, another 3 nights. This time I didn't ask. I already knew what he'd say. Just pay it. And I did, because what choice did I have? But I also started keeping the bills. Filed them in a folder I hid in the back of the closet where we kept old tax returns. Some part of me, the part that wasn't completely submerged in denial, knew I was collecting evidence. I stopped sleeping well. Would lie awake at 2, 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan making its lazy circles, listening to him breathe, wondering who he was, wondering who I was, the stranger in my bed and the stranger I'd become. One particular night stands out in my memory. It was around 3 a.m., and I'd given up trying to sleep. I went to the kitchen, made myself chamomile tea that I didn't really want, and sat at the table in the dark. The house was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming, the ice maker dropping cubes into the bin, the settling creaks of a house that had sheltered us for over 2 decades. I looked around that kitchen. At the countertops I'd picked out after months of deliberation. The backsplash I'd installed myself, watching YouTube tutorials because we couldn't afford to hire someone. The curtains I'd sewn by hand, matching fabric from 3 different stores to get exactly the right shade of blue. I'd built this house into a home, poured myself into every corner of it. And for what? To sit alone in the dark at 3 in the morning, drinking tea I didn't want, wondering if my entire life was a lie? The thought made my hands shake so badly I had to set the mug down. Tea sloshed over the rim, pooling on the wooden table. I watched the puddle spread, darkening the wood, and I didn't clean it up. Just sat there watching it expand, thinking about how some stains can't be removed, no matter how hard you scrub. My friends started noticing. Linda, who I'd known since our kids were in elementary school together, asked me at coffee if everything was okay. I smiled and said I was just tired, not sleeping well, maybe needed to adjust my thyroid medication. All believable lies wrapped around the truth I couldn't say out loud. Because here's the thing about admitting something is wrong. Once you say it, you can't unsay it. Once you acknowledge the crack, you have to deal with the fact that your house might be falling down. And I'd invested everything in this house. Not just the physical building we'd paid off 15 years ago, but the life we'd built inside it. The memories, the routines, the identity of being Mrs. Someone for most of my adult life. Who was I without that? I genuinely didn't know. The isolation crept in slowly. I realized I'd let so many connections fade over the years. Old friends from before marriage who I'd lost touch with. Family members I only saw at holidays. My sister in California, who I talked to maybe twice a year. I'd convinced myself that my marriage was enough, that I didn't need a wide social circle. My husband was my best friend, wasn't he? Except he wasn't. I could see that now with painful clarity. Best friends don't make you feel crazy for asking simple questions. They don't dismiss your concerns with three-word commands. They don't spend mysterious nights at hotels and refuse to explain why. I thought about confiding in my daughter, Rebecca. She lived 20 minutes away with her husband and 2 kids. We had Sunday dinners together, had for years. But every time I opened my mouth to say something, I'd look at her happy family, her trust in her own husband, and the words would die in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I destroyed her faith in relationships, in her father, over nothing but paranoid suspicions? So I stayed quiet, isolated myself further while pretending everything was fine, smiled through the Sunday dinners while that splinter worked its way toward my heart. There was one Sunday in particular that almost broke me. Rebecca had made pot roast, my favorite, and the whole family was gathered around the table. My husband was at one end, playing the perfect grandfather, making the kids laugh with silly voices and exaggerated stories. He looked so normal, so loving, so completely unlike someone who was living a double life. I watched him bounce our youngest grandson on his knee, watched the little boy's face light up with joy, and something in me fractured. How could this man, this grandfather who made children laugh, be the same person who dismissed my concerns and spent our money on hotel rooms I knew nothing about? "Mom, you okay?" Rebecca asked. She was looking at me with concern, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Fine," I said automatically, just thinking about something I forgot to do. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning at that dinner table, surrounded by my family, more alone than I'd ever been in my life. After dinner, while Rebecca and I were cleaning up, she said, "You and Dad seem distant lately. Everything good between you two?" My hands were in the soapy water, washing a serving bowl. I focused on that task, on the slick ceramic and the warm suds, because if I looked at her, I might break down completely. "We're fine," I said. "Just the usual old married couple stuff. You know how it is." She didn't know how it was. Her marriage was young, still full of romance and shared dreams. She had no idea what almost 4 decades together looked like when trust started eroding. "If you ever need to talk," she said, drying a plate, "I'm here. You know that, right?" "I know," I said, and meant it. But I still couldn't find the words to tell her what was happening. Couldn't admit that her father might be someone other than who she thought he was. The 3rd bill never came in the mail. I found out about it a different way, and that's when everything changed. That's when the splinter finally hit something vital, and I started bleeding out truths I could no longer ignore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how deep my self-doubt ran, how thoroughly I'd been conditioned to question my own perceptions, because that's what made what came next so devastating. I'd spent months gaslighting myself, doing his work for him, convincing myself I was imagining things. You know what they say, trust your gut. But what do you do when your gut has been telling you lies for so long that you don't know what truth feels like anymore? I was about to find out. And it was going to hurt worse than anything I'd ever experienced. Worse than childbirth, worse than losing my mother, because those were pains I expected. This was a pain I'd spent decades pretending could never happen to me. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. And spoiler alert, I wasn't ready. Nobody ever is. I started going through our credit card statements. Not obviously, not like I was conducting an investigation. Just casual browsing while he was at work, the statements pulled up on my laptop at the kitchen table. I told myself I was just being thorough, being responsible, good financial management. Nothing suspicious about a wife checking the family accounts. Except it was suspicious. I was looking for something specific now, even if I couldn't admit it to myself. And I found it. Oh, I found it in spades. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Florist purchases every few weeks. More hotel bills. Not just the Meridian, but others scattered across the city. Wine shops, jewelry stores, spa packages. A pattern emerging like a photograph developing in chemicals, the image becoming clearer and more horrible with each passing second. My hands shook as I scrolled. That metallic taste of shock filled my mouth, like I'd bitten down on aluminum foil. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, a dull thunder that drowned out everything else. How much money had he spent? I started adding it up, months and months of charges, and the number made me physically ill. Thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. Money that came from our joint accounts, our shared life, our retirement savings. Money I'd helped earn through decades of managing our household, raising our children, supporting his career. He was spending our future on someone else. I wanted to throw up. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, staring at the numbers on the screen until they blurred together. Some part of me was still trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe he was planning a surprise for our anniversary. Maybe he was helping a friend in need. Maybe. But the maybes were wearing thin. The truth was right there in black and white, line items of betrayal charged to our visa. I remember I got up at some point, walked to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked old, tired, defeated. When had I gotten so old? When had those lines appeared around my mouth, that sag under my chin? When had I stopped recognizing myself? I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. The numbers were still there when I went back to the laptop. The evidence was still damning. My life was still falling apart. That night at dinner, I watched him eat the casserole I'd made, watched him complain about his day at work, watched him scroll through his phone between bites. He seemed completely normal, relaxed, no guilt, no anxiety, no tells that he was living a double life. How was that possible? How could he sit there so calmly while I was drowning in questions across the table? I opened my mouth to confront him. The words were right there. But what came out instead was, "How was your day?" He grunted something about a difficult client and asked if there was any more garlic bread. I got up, got him the bread, and said nothing about what I'd found. Because I was still afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being right. Afraid of what would happen if I pulled on this thread and my entire life unraveled. That's when I started the real investigation. I felt guilty about it, sneaking around in my own house like a criminal. But the guilt was smaller than the need to know. I went through his pockets when he showered, looked through his car when he was working in the yard, checked his computer history late at night when he was snoring beside me. The first time I went through his pockets, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unbutton his pants. I felt like a thief, like I was violating some sacred trust. But wasn't he the one who'd violated our trust? Wasn't I just trying to find the truth? I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. Dinner at a restaurant called Maison Bleue. $237. I'd never heard of the place, so I looked it up. French cuisine, intimate atmosphere. Reservations required weeks in advance. The kind of place you take someone you're trying to impress. The kind of place he'd never taken me. I found emails. God, the emails. Not on his main account, he was smarter than that. But on a secondary account I'd never known existed, one he'd created specifically for this purpose. The address was something generic, meaningless, designed to be forgettable. But the contents were anything but. Her name was Vanessa. She was 42, 20 years younger than me. She worked at a gallery downtown, all sophisticated and cultured and everything I guess I wasn't anymore. The emails were full of inside jokes, terms of endearment, planning for future trips. He called her things he hadn't called me in years, maybe ever. Told her she made him feel alive again. I read every single email, torturing myself with the details of their relationship. The restaurants they went to, the shows they saw, the hotel rooms they shared, my hotel rooms, my money, my husband. One email in particular stuck with me. He wrote, "Being with you reminds me what passion feels like. I'd forgotten it was even possible to feel this way. Like I was some kind of emotional desert he'd been trapped in for decades. Like our entire marriage, our children, our life together, was just something to be endured until he found someone better." I sat in his office, laptop open to those emails, and I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. I was beyond crying. I'd entered some new territory of pain where the body just shuts down because the alternative is too much to bear. Have you ever doubted your own sanity? Really, truly questioned whether your mind was working right? Because that's where I was, staring at undeniable proof of betrayal, while some part of my brain still tried to explain it away. Maybe the emails were fake. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was having a breakdown and hallucinating the whole thing. But I wasn't. The emails were real. The charges were real. Vanessa was real. And my husband, the man I'd spent almost 4 decades with, was someone I didn't know at all. I printed everything, created a folder full of evidence that I hid in my car in a box under the spare tire where I knew he'd never look. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I needed to know I had it. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Documentation that this was happening. The printing took forever. Email after email spitting out of our home printer, page after page of betrayal on crisp white paper. I stood there watching them pile up, feeling detached from my own body. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be happening to me. But it was. The stack of papers proved it. The isolation felt crushing now. I had no one to talk to, no one who could understand what I was going through. I'd let my friendships atrophy, convinced myself that my marriage was enough. And now I was paying the price for that miscalculation, drowning in knowledge I couldn't share. My daughter called one afternoon, asking if I wanted to bring dessert to Sunday dinner. Her voice was so cheerful, so normal. I said yes, of course. I'd make my apple pie. Hung up and stared at the phone in my hand like it was an artifact from another life. How could everything look so normal from the outside when it was all rotting from within? How could I still be making apple pies and attending book clubs and smiling at neighbors when my entire existence was a lie? I went through the motions, cooked dinner, did laundry, watered the plants on the porch, but I was just a shell going through programmed behaviors. All the life drained out of me and replaced with this horrible knowing. The worst part was the nights, lying next to him in bed, feeling the heat of his body, hearing him breathe, knowing that this same body had been in hotel rooms with her. These same hands that held mine during our wedding vows had held hers across candle-lit tables. This same mouth that kissed me goodnight had whispered loving words to someone else. I started sleeping on the couch, claiming my back hurt. He didn't even ask questions, just mumbled something about seeing a chiropractor, and rolled over to sleep diagonally across the bed, spreading into the space I'd left behind. Looking back now, I can see the layers of sacrifice I'd made over the years. It wasn't just friendships I'd let go. It was pieces of myself. I used to paint, did you know that? Had a whole studio set up in the spare room when we first got married. But then kids came along, and his career needed support, and the spare room became a nursery, then a playroom, then storage. My paints dried up in their tubes, brushes went stiff, canvases got stacked in the garage and eventually thrown out. I told myself it was fine. That motherhood and being a supportive wife were more important than some hobby, that I could always paint later, when there was more time. Later never came. The time got filled with his needs, his schedule, his priorities, and I let it happen. Convinced myself that his success was our success, that supporting him was the same as supporting myself. What a fool I'd been. I'd traded my identity for the privilege of being Mrs. Someone, and now I was discovering that the someone I'd married was a stranger who spent our money on another woman while I made casseroles and pretended everything was fine. The anger started then. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind that settles in your bones and changes the way you see everything. I'd look at him and think, "You're going to pay for this. Not sure how yet, but you're going to pay." But I was still too afraid to confront him, too conditioned to keep the peace, too worried about what would happen if I actually said the words out loud and made this real. So I kept gathering evidence, kept documenting, kept pretending, all while that cold anger grew and spread through me like frost, turning everything brittle and ready to shatter. I started a journal during this time. Nothing fancy, just a plain spiral notebook I kept hidden with the other evidence. I wrote down everything, dates, times, observations, the way he'd come home late on Tuesday, smelling faintly of perfume. The hushed phone call I'd overheard through the bathroom door. The charge for flowers on Valentine's Day that I'd never received. Writing it down made it real in a way that just thinking about it didn't. Made it impossible to deny or explain away. Black ink on white paper, truth that couldn't be erased. February 14th, I wrote. Valentine's Day. He gave me a card he'd clearly picked up at the grocery store, generic message about love and commitment. Inside was $50 cash and a note that said, "Buy yourself something nice." No dinner reservation, no flowers, no effort. But there was a charge on our credit card for $212 at a florist, and another at a steakhouse downtown. Same day. He'd celebrated Valentine's Day with her, given me an afterthought. I held that journal entry up to the light, staring at my own handwriting, and something inside me went completely cold. The breaking point came at my niece's graduation party. I didn't know it would be the moment everything fell apart, but looking back, maybe it was inevitable. Maybe I was already so fractured that the slightest pressure would have done it. Rebecca was hosting at her house, a backyard barbecue with the whole extended family. My niece Melissa had just graduated from Arizona State with honors, and everyone was celebrating. The weather was perfect, the kind of warm spring evening where everything feels possible. Kids were running around playing tag. Men were standing around the grill debating charcoal versus gas. Women were in the kitchen arranging side dishes and talking about nothing important. I was putting together a salad when I heard my husband's voice from the backyard. He was talking to my brother-in-law, Tom, their voices carrying through the open window. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but Tom said something that made my hands freeze mid-chop. "That trip to the coast you took last month looked amazing. Kelly was showing everyone the photos. That inn you guys stayed at was incredible." My husband laughed. "Yeah, it was pretty special. Needed a break, you know? Get away from the routine." I stood there with the knife in my hand, lettuce scattered on the cutting board, trying to process what I'd just heard. A trip to the coast, last month, photos he'd shared with people, an inn that was incredible. I hadn't gone on any trip to the coast. Last month I'd been here, in Phoenix, living my normal life, while he was apparently off taking romantic getaways and sharing photos with people like it was totally normal. The kitchen tilted, not actually, but that's what it felt like. Like gravity had shifted and I couldn't find my balance. My sister, who was arranging deviled eggs on a platter, asked if I was okay. I must have made some noise, some sound of distress I wasn't aware of. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded strange, far away. Just felt dizzy for a second. She looked concerned, started to reach for me, but I moved away. Walked outside into the party, into the sunshine and laughter and normalcy, searching for my husband. Found him by the grill, beer in hand, telling some story to a group of relatives who were laughing. I walked up to him, touched his arm. He turned, smiled at me like everything was perfectly fine. "Can we talk?" I said. Inside, something in my voice must have registered because his smile faltered. "Now? We're about to eat." "Now." We went inside to Rebecca's living room. I could hear the party continuing outside, oblivious. I turned to face him, and the words came out flat, emotionless. "Tom mentioned your trip to the coast. Want to tell me about it?" I watched him calculate. Watched the gears turn as he decided whether to keep lying or finally admit it. His face did this thing, this tiny micro-expression of annoyance, like I'd caught him in something minor and inconvenient, rather than in the destruction of our entire marriage. "It was a work thing," he said. "Last minute. I told you about it." "No, you didn't." "I'm sure I did. You probably just forgot." And there it was. The gaslighting laid bare, making me doubt my own memory, my own sanity. Except this time, I had too much evidence, too much proof, and I was done doubting myself. "You're lying," I said. Simple, direct, true. His face darkened. "Jesus Christ. Are we really doing this here, at Melissa's party?" "Yes, we're really doing this. Who is she?" Silence. Long enough that I could hear a burst of laughter from outside, someone's phone ringing, a car passing on the street. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Vanessa, the hotel bills, the emails, the money you've been spending on her for God knows how long. That trip to the coast. Stop lying and just tell me the truth." I watched the calculation shift behind his eyes, watched him realize that I knew, really knew, not just suspected, but had evidence. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked toward the window like he was considering just walking out. "How long?" I asked, and my voice cracked on the words. "How long have you been cheating on me?" "Don't make this dramatic," he said. "It's not what you think." "How long?" 2 years. Okay? 2 years. It's not serious. It doesn't change anything between us. 2 years. 730 days of lying, of hotel rooms and romantic dinners and secret emails, of coming home to me and pretending everything was normal, of letting me doubt myself, isolate myself, destroy myself from within while he lived this double life. My body did something then that I had no control over, just shut down completely. Like all my systems recognized that this was too much to process and went into emergency mode. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on Rebecca's couch, and I couldn't breathe right. Couldn't get enough air. The room was spinning and my chest hurt, and I thought, absurdly, that I might be having a heart attack at my niece's graduation party. He didn't move to help me. Just stood there watching me struggle to breathe, annoyed that I was making a scene. "You need to calm down," he said. "People are going to notice." I looked up at him. Really looked, and I didn't recognize the person standing there. This man who I'd loved for decades, who I'd built a life with, who I'd sacrificed everything for. He was a stranger. Worse than a stranger who'd worn my husband's face while destroying me from the inside out. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out. Leave. I don't care where you go. Go to her. Just get out of my sight." "You're being ridiculous. We need to talk about this rationally." But I couldn't talk, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but sit there on that couch while my entire world collapsed around me. That's what it felt like the walls were caving in, the floor dropping away, everything I'd believed in turning to ash. Rebecca found me there 10 minutes later, after he'd left. Curled up on her couch, staring at nothing, barely breathing. She knew immediately that something catastrophic had happened. Sat down next to me, put her arm around my shoulders, and asked what was wrong. And I told her everything. The bills, the emails, the coast trip, Vanessa, 2 years of lies. It poured out of me in fragments, broken pieces of truth that I'd been holding inside for months. She listened without interrupting, her arm tightening around me as the story unfolded. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Grandma's here. You should talk to her." I'd forgotten my mother-in-law was at the party. She was 84, sharp as ever, sitting in the backyard holding court with the younger generation. Rebecca went and got her, brought her inside without explaining why. My mother-in-law took one look at me and knew. That's the thing about older women. They've seen it all before. They know the look of a wife who's just discovered her husband's betrayal because they've worn it themselves, or seen their friends wear it, or their mothers before them. She sat down on my other side. "Tell me," she said. So I told her too. And she listened with this expression I couldn't quite read. Not surprise, not even much anger. Just this weary recognition, like she'd known something like this was coming. When I finished, she sighed. "My son is a fool," she said, "and you've been suffering alone." I didn't know what to do, who to tell. "You tell me, you tell Rebecca, you tell anyone who will listen. You don't suffer in silence while he destroys you." She took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin, spotted with age, but her grip was strong. "I know what it's like," she said. "My husband did the same thing. Different era, same story, and I stayed. Biggest regret of my life." I stared at her. I'd never known. 38 years of family gatherings and holidays, and I'd never known my father-in-law had been unfaithful. "Don't make my mistake," she said. "Don't waste another year of your life on someone who doesn't deserve it." Something shifted in me then. Sitting there between my daughter and my husband's mother, I realized I wasn't alone after all. I'd isolated myself, yes, but help had been there all along, waiting for me to reach out and take it. The party was winding down outside. People were saying their goodbyes, thanking Rebecca for hosting, congratulating Melissa one more time. Normal life continuing while mine had just exploded. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt angry, properly, righteously angry, not at myself for not seeing it sooner, not at Vanessa for being the other woman, at him, for lying, for stealing, for making me doubt my own sanity while he lived his secret life. "What are you going to do?" Rebecca asked. I thought about the evidence in my car, the bank statements, the emails, the documentation of every lie. I thought about 2 years of hotel bills and romantic dinners bought with our money. I thought about his annoyed face when I asked for the truth, like I was inconveniencing him by discovering his affair. "I'm going to make him pay," I said. Not a plan yet, not even close, but a decision, a line drawn in the sand. I was done being the accommodating wife who smoothed things over and kept the peace. Done doubting myself. Done protecting him from the consequences of his choices. My mother-in-law squeezed my hand. "Good," she said. "It's about time." We sat there as the sun went down, the three of us, while outside the party finally ended and people drove away into the warm Phoenix night. Tomorrow I'd figure out the details. Tonight, I just sat with these 2 women who'd shown me I wasn't alone, who'd given me permission to be angry, who'd reminded me that I deserved better. The worst part was over. The not knowing, the self-doubt, the isolation. Now I knew the truth. Now I had allies. Now I could fight back. And I was going to destroy him. The next morning I woke up on Rebecca's couch. She'd insisted I stay over, made up the guest room, but I'd ended up here instead, unable to face a bed that reminded me of all the nights I'd spent next to a stranger. My phone was full of missed calls from him, 17 of them. I deleted each one without listening to the voicemails. Rebecca came downstairs around 7, found me sitting there, staring at my phone. She made coffee, handed me a mug, and sat down in the armchair across from me. "I called Aunt Sarah last night after you fell asleep," she said. "She's on her way, should be here by noon." Sarah was my sister, the one in California I barely talked to anymore. The one I'd let drift away because managing my marriage seemed more important than maintaining family connections. Shame washed over me, hot and prickly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Mom, you need people around you. You've been isolated for too long." She was right. I could see it now with horrible clarity, how I'd slowly cut myself off from everyone except him. How I'd made him the center of my entire universe while he was building a second solar system with someone else at its core. "I'm so stupid," I said. "You're not stupid. You're loyal. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's not stupidity. That's love." "Well, love is stupid then." She smiled a little. "Sometimes, but not always. You'll find out." I didn't believe her. Sitting there in yesterday's clothes, unwashed and wrecked, I couldn't imagine ever trusting anyone again. The thought of opening myself up to another person, making myself vulnerable, letting them close enough to hurt me. No, never again. But I didn't argue, just drank my coffee and tried to figure out what to do next. My granddaughter Emma came down around 8. She was Rebecca's oldest, 19 and home from college for the summer. I'd forgotten she'd been at the party, forgotten everyone had been there, had witnessed some version of my meltdown. Emma sat down on the couch next to me. Didn't say anything at first, just sat close. Then, quietly, "I heard what happened. I'm sorry, Grandma." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "He doesn't deserve you," she said. "I know that's not helpful right now, but it's true. Everyone keeps saying that. Doesn't make it hurt less." "I know." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "I never liked him much. Grandpa, I love him because he's family, but I never liked him. He always seemed kind of cold, like he was playing a part instead of being real." I turned to look at her. "Why didn't you say anything?" She shrugged. "What was I supposed to say? Hey, Grandma, I think your husband is fake? You would have thought I was being dramatic. Besides, you seemed happy. Or I thought you did." I wasn't. Not really. I just didn't let myself see it. "Well, you see it now. So what are you going to do?" The question everyone kept asking. What was I going to do? I had evidence. I had witnesses. I had righteous anger and decades of sacrifice to fuel me. But I didn't have a plan. "I don't know yet." Emma pulled back to look at me. "Grandma, you're like the smartest person I know. You used to run the household finances like a business. You organized entire family reunions. You can figure this out." Could I? I felt so depleted, so hollowed out, like there was nothing left inside me but anger and hurt. But Emma was looking at me with such certainty, such faith that I could handle this. And something in me responded to that faith, sat up a little straighter, started thinking instead of just feeling. "I need to protect myself financially," I said, thinking out loud. "He's been spending our money on her. Who knows what else he's done? I need to see everything, every account, every asset, every penny." "Mom can help with that," Rebecca said. "She works in finance, remember?" I'd forgotten. My own daughter worked as a financial advisor, and I'd forgotten because I was so deep in my own spiral of pain, I couldn't think straight. "I need a lawyer, too. A good one." "I know someone," Emma said. "One of my professors is married to a divorce attorney, supposed to be ruthless. Want me to get you the number?" Divorce. The word landed like a bomb. I'd been married for 38 years, almost 4 decades. Divorce meant ending that, making it official, telling the world that we'd failed. Except we hadn't failed. He had. And I needed to stop taking responsibility for his choices. "Yes," I said. "Get me the number." Things moved quickly after that. Sarah arrived from California, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug that made me finally cry. Really cry, not the shut-down shock from the night before, but deep sobs that hurt my chest and made me shake. She held me through it, didn't tell me to calm down or stop crying, just held on while I broke apart and tried to put myself back together. When I could breathe again, she said, "I'm staying, however long you need. I've got nowhere more important to be." I'd spent so long thinking I was alone, but I wasn't. My family was here. They'd always been here. I just had to let them in. Over the next few days, we worked. Rebecca pulled our financial records, creating spreadsheets that showed every penny that had gone in and out of our accounts for the past 3 years. We sat together at her dining room table, laptops open, papers spread everywhere. She'd brought home special software from her office, the kind she used with clients who needed deep financial analysis. Watching her work was mesmerizing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up statements, cross-referencing dates, color-coding transactions. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a cluster of red entries on her screen. "Every third Thursday for 18 months, same restaurant, same amount, give or take. That's not random. That's a standing date." My stomach turned. A standing date. While I was home making dinner, probably wondering why he was late from work, he was with her. Every third Thursday, like clockwork. "And here," Rebecca continued, her voice getting tighter with anger. "Valentine's Day, your anniversary, Mother's Day. Every single occasion there are charges, flowers, jewelry, restaurants. But you never received anything, did you?" I shook my head, unable to speak. She kept going, relentless now in her pursuit of the truth. He was systematic about it. Used the joint card for things he could explain away as business expenses. Cash withdrawals for things he couldn't. Look at this pattern of ATM withdrawals. Every Friday, $200. For 2 years. "Where did that money go?" I asked. "I don't know, but it's another $10,000 we can't account for. Add it to the pile." The pile. That's what we started calling it. The pile of evidence, the pile of lies, the pile of money he'd stolen from our future to fund his affair. The numbers were staggering. He'd spent over $75,000 on Vanessa. $75,000 of our retirement savings, our security, our future. Maybe more if you counted the cash withdrawals we couldn't trace. I felt sick looking at it, but I also felt vindicated. This was proof. Undeniable, documented proof of betrayal. Sarah brought us lunch that afternoon, found us still hunched over the laptop, highlighting and categorizing and documenting. She set down sandwiches we barely touched, coffee that went cold while we worked. "You need to eat," she said gently. "We need to finish this," Rebecca replied. Her jaw set in determination I'd only seen a few times in her life. She was protecting me the way I'd protected her when she was young. The roles had reversed, and I was grateful for it. By evening, we had everything organized. 3 years of financial history, color-coded by category. Red for romantic expenses, blue for hotels, green for gifts, yellow for unexplained cash. The spreadsheet was a rainbow of betrayal. "Mom," Rebecca said, saving the file, "this is airtight. Any lawyer would kill to have this much documentation. He can't talk his way out of this." She was right. There was no explaining this away. No gaslighting me into thinking I'd misunderstood or overreacted. The numbers didn't lie. They couldn't be argued with or dismissed. The lawyer Emma connected me with was a woman named Patricia Chen, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for winning. She listened to my story, looked over my evidence, and smiled. "This is going to be easy," she said. "He's been incredibly sloppy. Most of this is financial abuse, by the way. Did you know that?" I didn't know there was a term for what he'd done. But hearing it named, hearing it recognized as abuse rather than just infidelity, something clicked into place. "We're going to protect your assets first," Patricia said. "Then we're going to make him pay for what he's taken, both financially and otherwise." Otherwise? Community property state. Everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50. But judges can deviate from that when there's misconduct. Financial infidelity, dissipation of marital assets. We can argue he squandered community property on an extramarital affair. You could end up with significantly more than half. I liked the sound of that. Liked it a lot. Patricia walked me through the process, step by step. First, we'd need to freeze joint accounts to prevent further dissipation. Then we'd file for divorce and request temporary orders for support and exclusive use of the marital home. We'd subpoena financial records, document everything, build an ironclad case. "I've handled cases like this before," she said. "Men who think they can hide their affairs behind business expenses and cash withdrawals. They always leave a trail, always. And your husband left a highway." She wasn't wrong. Looking at the evidence Rebecca had compiled, the pattern was obvious. Every third Thursday, charges at the same restaurant, weekend hotel stays that coincided with times he'd claimed to be at conferences, jewelry purchases that I'd never received. "There's something else," Patricia said. "Community property laws protect both spouses. If he's been systematically hiding expenditures from you, that's not just infidelity, that's financial fraud. We can use that." The more she explained, the angrier I became, not the scared, uncertain anger from before. This was clear, focused rage at being treated like I didn't matter, like my contributions to our marriage were worthless. He'd been trying to call me constantly, showing up at Rebecca's house until she threatened to call the police, sending emails that ranged from apologetic to angry to pleading. I ignored all of it, let him spiral while I built my case. One email stood out, though. He wrote, "You're overreacting. Every marriage has problems. We can work through this if you'd just be reasonable." Reasonable. Like discovering a 2-year affair and $75,000 in hidden expenses was something that required me to be reasonable about. I showed the email to Patricia. She actually laughed. "Keep these," she said. "Every attempt to minimize, to gaslight, to make you seem irrational. It's all evidence of his mindset. Judges see through this." A friend sent me an article during this time. It said that 1 in 10 Americans over 60 experiences some form of elder abuse, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, isolation from family and friends. I read it sitting at Sarah's borrowed laptop, and something cold settled in my chest. I was one of those statistics. My husband had been systematically exploiting me for years, and I'd been too close to see it. Too conditioned to doubt my own perceptions, too afraid of being the paranoid wife. But I wasn't paranoid. I was being abused. And now I had a name for it. Now I could fight back. I spent hours going through our files, our records, our entire financial history. Found more evidence, more lies, more money spent on his secret life. Every discovery hurt, but I documented it all. Built a case that would be impossible to defend against. Sarah watched me work, sometimes making coffee or ordering takeout when I forgot to eat. One night she said, "You're different, stronger than I remember." I don't feel strong. I feel destroyed. Destruction is the first step of rebuilding. You're clearing the ground. What comes next will be better. I wanted to believe her. Some days I could almost see it. A life beyond this pain, a future that didn't include him. Other days, I just felt broken. But I kept working, kept gathering evidence, kept building the foundation for whatever came next. Because Emma was right, I was smart. I'd managed complicated things before. I could manage this too. I just had to survive it first. My mother-in-law called one afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "I need to apologize," she said. "For what? For raising a son who could do this, for not seeing it sooner, for not warning you." "How could you have warned me? You didn't know." I knew what his father was, should have known it would show up in him too. These things run in families sometimes. I thought about what she'd told me at the party, how her husband had done the same thing, how she'd stayed and regretted it. "I'm not staying," I said. "Good. You're braver than I was. Smarter. Don't let him convince you otherwise." We talked for over an hour. She told me stories I'd never heard, about her own marriage, her own struggles, about the isolation and doubt. The gaslighting before there was even a word for it. "You're doing the right thing," she said before we hung up. "I'm proud of you, and I'm on your side, not his." That meant more than I could express. To have his own mother support me in leaving him, to not be alone in this fight. The days blurred together, planning, organizing, building my case. My lawyer filed for divorce, had him served at work, which I took a petty satisfaction in. Let him feel embarrassed for once. Let him explain to his colleagues why his wife was divorcing him. He showed up at Rebecca's again after that, banged on the door until she threatened to call the police. He shouted through the wood that I was being unreasonable, that we needed to talk, that I was destroying our family over nothing. Nothing. 2 years of lying, $75,000, a whole separate relationship. Nothing. I didn't open the door, just sat in the living room listening to him rage, and I felt nothing. The love that had sustained me for decades had simply evaporated, burned away by betrayal until there was nothing left but ash. Eventually, he gave up and left. I watched through the window as he got in his car and drove away, wondered if he was going to her. Probably. Where else would he go? I didn't care. That was the strangest part. I genuinely didn't care where he went or what he did anymore. He'd become irrelevant to my life in the span of a few days. A week after filing for divorce, I went home. Our home. The house we'd lived in for 23 years. I went with Sarah and Rebecca just in case he was there, but he wasn't. The house was empty, quiet, felt different already, like it knew it wasn't mine anymore. I packed my things methodically. Clothes, jewelry, personal items, photo albums of my children, not of him. Things that were mine and only mine. Left behind the shared memories, the joint possessions, everything that tied me to him. Walking through those rooms felt like walking through a museum of my own life. Here was the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, the bedroom where I'd slept beside a stranger, the porch where I'd sipped coffee and pretended everything was fine. I didn't feel sad leaving it, just relieved, like I was escaping a prison I hadn't known I was in. We loaded everything into Rebecca's car. I took one last look at the house, and then I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. That's the thing about betrayal this deep. It doesn't heal. It scars over, and you learn to build your life around the scar tissue. But you're never quite the same person you were before. I was different now, harder, more suspicious, less willing to trust, but also stronger. More certain of my own worth, more willing to fight for myself instead of accepting whatever scraps I was given. The divorce proceedings started. He fought everything, of course, claimed I was exaggerating, that the money spent on Vanessa was minimal, that he deserved half of everything regardless of what he'd done. But I had evidence, mountains of it, every email, every receipt, every lie documented and time-stamped. My lawyer presented it all with cold precision, building a case that was impossible to refute. The judge was a woman in her 60s. She looked at the evidence, looked at him, and her expression hardened. I saw the moment she decided, saw her recognize the pattern of abuse and manipulation. The settlement was heavily in my favor. I got the house, most of our retirement accounts, and he had to pay back the $75,000 he'd spent on Vanessa. My lawyer called it reimbursement for dissipation of marital assets. I called it justice. He was furious, tried to appeal, but his own lawyer told him he didn't have grounds. He'd been caught in black and white. There was no arguing with the evidence. I later learned that victims of financial abuse often try to leave an average of 7 times before they finally succeed. When I read that, I stopped feeling ashamed of how long it had taken me to see the truth. Stopped beating myself up for staying as long as I did. I'd left on my first try. That made me one of the lucky ones. Not that it felt lucky. Sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final papers, officially ending 38 years of marriage, I felt empty. Not victorious, not relieved, just empty. But empty was better than full of lies, better than full of his gaslighting and my self-doubt. Empty meant I had room to fill with something new. The confrontation I'd imagined, the big, dramatic scene where I laid out all his sins and he begged forgiveness, never happened. Real life isn't that clean. He never admitted wrongdoing, never apologized, just fought me every step of the way and lost. His family turned on him, though. That was something. His mother stopped taking his calls. His siblings sided with me. Even Vanessa apparently left him once she realized he'd lost most of his money in the divorce. Turns out, she wasn't interested in a relationship that didn't come with fancy hotels and expensive dinners. He ended up in a small apartment on the other side of Phoenix, alone, broke, exactly what he deserved. I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being angry, tired of letting him take up space in my head. It was time to rebuild. Time to figure out who I was beyond being his wife, beyond being the woman he'd betrayed and exploited. That's where the real work began. I stayed with Rebecca for the first few months after the divorce was finalized. Needed the support, the company, the reminder that I wasn't alone. Emma was there too, home for the summer, and she became an unexpected source of strength. We'd sit up late talking, me and this granddaughter who'd always seemed so young, but she wasn't young. She was wise and fierce and everything I'd forgotten I could be. "What do you want to do now?" she asked me one night. Like actually want to do, not what you think you should do, what you want. I had to think about it. I'd spent so long defining myself through other people's needs that I didn't know what I wanted anymore. "I used to paint," I said finally. "Before everything, I was pretty good at it. So paint. I'm 62, bit late to start over." "Says who? You've got at least another 30 years. You gonna spend them being scared to try?" She had a point. What was I saving myself for? What was I protecting by playing it safe? I bought art supplies the next day, set up a corner of Rebecca's garage as a makeshift studio, started painting again for the first time in decades. It was terrible at first. My hands didn't remember the motions. My eye for color was rusty. The first canvas I attempted ended up being an angry mess of brown and black, something that looked more like a bruise than art. I almost quit right then, almost packed everything away and gave up. But Emma found me staring at that ugly canvas, and she said, "That's perfect. That's exactly what you needed to get out." So I kept going, painted through the ugliness, through the rage, through the pain. But it felt good, felt like reclaiming something I'd lost. Each brushstroke was a tiny act of rebellion against all the years I'd spent putting everyone else first. I painted my anger, my pain, my slow journey back to myself. Dark colors at first, all blacks and grays and deep reds. But gradually lighter shades crept in, blues and greens and eventually yellow. Sarah came to visit, saw what I was doing, and cried. "You're coming back," she said. "I can see it." Maybe I was, slowly, piece by piece. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter. It was Emma's idea. She'd been volunteering there herself, helping women escape domestic violence, and suggested I might find purpose there. I was skeptical at first. What did I have to offer? I was still broken myself. But the director, Maria, welcomed me. "You have experience," she said. "You survived. That's worth everything to the women here." So I started helping. The first support group I led was terrifying. 10 women sat in a circle, looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to say something wise or comforting or helpful. I didn't feel wise. I felt like a fraud. But I started talking, told them about the hotel bill, the dismissive, "just pay it," the months of self-doubt. And I watched their faces change, saw recognition dawn in their eyes, saw them nodding, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. When I finished, a woman named Jennifer spoke up. "He told you that you were overreacting?" she said. Mine said the exact same thing, word for word, like they all read from the same script. And then the floodgates opened. Story after story of women who'd been told they were crazy, paranoid, overreacting. Women who'd been systematically isolated from friends and family. Women who'd had their finances controlled, their perceptions questioned, their reality denied. Leading support groups, sharing my story, listening to theirs. And something strange happened. The more I gave, the more I healed, helping others find their strength, helped me find mine. I met women who'd been through worse than me. Physical violence, psychological torture, isolation that made my experience look mild. But I also met women whose stories mirrored mine almost exactly. The financial exploitation, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of self. One woman showed me bruises she'd hidden under long sleeves. Another talked about being locked in her own house. A third described how her husband had drained their bank account and disappeared, leaving her and their children homeless. My pain was real. But it wasn't unique. And somehow, knowing I wasn't alone in this made it easier to bear. We recognized each other instantly, knew the same pain, and we helped each other survive it. One woman, Christine, told me she'd stayed for 20 years because she didn't think she could make it alone. I was terrified of being by myself, she said, thought I needed him to survive. I understood that fear intimately. But you know what I learned, she continued. Being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. Truth, pure, simple truth. I'd been lonelier in my marriage than I was now, divorced and starting over. At least now the loneliness was honest, not laced with lies and betrayal. The shelter work became my purpose. I went from volunteering a few hours a week to being there almost daily, helping women file protection orders, navigate divorces, find resources, sharing what I'd learned through my own nightmare. Maria pulled me aside one day. "You're good at this," she said. "You should consider making it official. We have a paid position opening up, advocate coordinator. You'd be perfect." Me? Working? I hadn't had a job outside the home in almost 4 decades. The idea was terrifying, but also exciting. A real purpose, a real identity beyond wife or mother or grandmother. "I'll think about it," I said. I thought about it for a week, talked to Sarah, to Rebecca, to Emma. They all encouraged me, said I'd be amazing at it, said it was time to build something just for me. I took the job, started working full-time for the first time since before my kids were born, and I loved it. Loved having somewhere to be, something to do that mattered. Loved helping women find the strength I'd had to find myself. The house sold 6 months after the divorce. I didn't want to keep it, couldn't afford to anyway after the settlement. Too many memories, too much history I needed to escape. I found a small condo downtown, just me, bright and modern, and nothing like the house I'd shared with him. I furnished it carefully, choosing pieces I loved rather than pieces that matched some predetermined style. Made it mine in a way our old house never really was. Hung my paintings on the walls, not hiding them in a spare room or garage, right there in the living room where everyone could see. Emma came to visit when I was settled, walked through admiring everything, then turned to me with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "Did what?" "Built a life, on your own. You're happy." Was I happy? I thought about it. The pain was still there, probably always would be, but it was quieter now, manageable, and underneath it was something new. Peace, purpose, pride. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." My mother-in-law died that winter, peacefully, in her sleep. At her funeral, my ex-husband tried to approach me. I turned and walked away without a word. He didn't deserve my time, my energy, or my forgiveness. Her will left me something unexpected. A small amount of money, yes, but also a letter. I read it alone in my condo, crying. She wrote about regret, about staying too long in a marriage that hurt her, about watching me make different choices and being proud, about hoping I'd use the money to do something just for joy, not obligation. I donated most of it to the women's shelter, used the rest to buy more art supplies and take a painting class at the community college. Used it for joy like she'd wanted. Time passed, seasons changed. I kept working, kept painting, kept building this new life. People asked if I'd date again. The answer was always no. Not because I was bitter or broken, but because I didn't need someone else to be complete. I was complete on my own. Besides, I didn't trust easily anymore. probably never would again. And that was okay. Better to be alone and safe than partnered and hurt. Emma graduated college and moved to Phoenix to be near family. She got an apartment near mine, and we started having regular dinner dates. Just us, talking about everything and nothing. She'd become one of my best friends, this granddaughter who'd helped save me when I was drowning. We'd built something real through my crisis, something lasting. Sarah visited often, sometimes staying for weeks. We'd sit on my small balcony drinking wine and talking like we had when we were young, before marriage and kids and life pulled us apart. "I missed you," she said one evening. "All those years you were with him, I missed having my sister. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let us drift apart. You were surviving. I get it now, but I'm glad you're back." Back. That was the right word. I'd come back to myself, back to the person I'd been before I learned to doubt my perceptions and silence my voice. The women at the shelter became my extended family. We celebrated each other's victories, supported each other through setbacks, formed bonds deeper than most friendships because we'd all survived the same nightmare. I watched women arrive broken and leave whole, watched them reclaim their lives, their strength, their futures, and every time I felt a little more healed myself. This was my purpose now. Not being someone's wife, not making myself small to accommodate someone else's ego, but helping others, creating meaning, building something that mattered. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. Something I wish I'd known earlier. Something that might help you or someone you know. Financial exploitation is more common than you think. It's not always obvious, like in my case. Sometimes it's subtle. Controlling access to bank accounts, making all financial decisions without input, creating dependence so you can't leave even if you want to. Here are some warning signs I missed, but wish I'd recognized. If your partner dismisses your questions about money with "just pay it" or "don't worry about it," that's a red flag. You have a right to know where money is going, especially if it's joint money. If you're being systematically cut off from financial information, that's control. Not protection. Not them handling it so you don't have to worry. Control. If your name is being removed from accounts or kept off new ones, alarm bells should ring. Community property means both names unless there's a very good reason. If money is disappearing and you're told you're imagining it or being paranoid, trust yourself. You're not crazy. Document everything. Print statements. Save receipts. Build your evidence. And here's the most important thing. Protect yourself now, before there's a problem. Have your own bank account. Know where all assets are. Keep copies of financial documents. Have access to everything that's jointly owned. I learned that about 60% of financial infidelity involves hiding purchases or debts from a partner. 60%. That means more than half of couples deal with this on some level. You're not alone if you're experiencing it. And it's not your fault. It's a form of abuse, even if there's no physical violence. It's designed to trap you, make you dependent, keep you from leaving. But you can leave. There are resources, lawyers who understand financial abuse, advocates who can help you document and build a case, shelters that provide not just housing, but financial planning and legal aid. The women's shelter where I work has helped hundreds of women navigate divorces where financial exploitation was involved. We've seen it all. Hidden accounts, depleted retirement funds, debt taken out in joint names for affairs. We know how to fight it. And the law is getting better at recognizing it. Judges understand now that dissipation of marital assets is abuse, that spending community money on an affair is theft, that financial infidelity has real consequences beyond just hurt feelings. If you're reading this and something feels off about your finances, trust that instinct. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. You're not being paranoid or controlling by wanting transparency about joint money. Get educated. Learn about your rights. Know what accounts exist, what's in them, where everything is. You don't have to be suspicious to be informed. It's just good financial planning. And if you discover betrayal like I did, know that you can survive it. It will hurt worse than you can imagine. You'll question everything, but you're stronger than you think. Document everything. Build your case. Get a good lawyer, protect yourself financially, and don't stay out of fear. Being alone is better than being with someone who's stealing from you, lying to you, or making you doubt your sanity. You deserve better. You deserve honesty, respect, and a partner who doesn't make you feel crazy for asking reasonable questions. And if you're already out, already rebuilding, know that it gets better. Slowly, painfully, but it does get better. You'll find purpose again, joy again, yourself again. I did. And if I can do it at 62, starting completely over, so can you. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. I know it was long, but some stories can't be told quickly. Some experiences need space to breathe, to unfold completely. I'd love to know where you are right now. What city? What time of day is it where you're listening? Are you at home, in your car, going about your normal routine while my story played in the background? Leave me a comment and let me know. Tell me what resonated with you. What surprised you? What made you angry, or sad, or hopeful? And if this story connected with you, if you found something valuable in my experience, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories, helps more people realize they're not alone in what they're going through. I want to hear from you specifically about this. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed and tried to work it out? Left sooner? Handled the confrontation differently? There's no right answer. I'm just curious what you think. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I'm not the only one sharing stories like this. There are so many voices, so many experiences, so many people who've survived betrayal and found their way back to themselves. You might find your story in one of theirs. I want to recommend 2 other stories you might connect with. There's one about a woman who discovered her husband's second family, and another about financial abuse that escalated over decades. Both are powerful. Both might help you see patterns in your own life or understand someone you know better. You can find them in the description or suggested videos. Take your time. Process this story first if you need to, but when you're ready, those voices are there waiting. Before I go, I want to say one more thing. To anyone listening who's in a situation like I was, to anyone doubting themselves, wondering if they're overreacting, scared to trust their own perceptions. You're not crazy. Your instincts are probably right, and you deserve so much better than what you're getting. It's terrifying to leave, to start over, to face being alone. I know, I lived it, but I'm here to tell you that the fear is temporary. The freedom is forever. You can do this.